A tax compliance statement issued by SARS indicates that the $4 million sale of animal at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala farm in 2020 has been declared. Now, the South African Revenue Services Commissioner Edward Kieswetter says all high-profile political office bearers should agree to make their tax affairs public as evidence of a commitment to transparency. And he joins us live now. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for your time. Of course, these are two issues. I mean, we saw the first statement that talks about the buyer, and now the statement talking about the president. Let's talk about the clarity around these two statements because they are part of the same story.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Bongiwe. So the accountability for the declaration of bringing the cash into our country rests with a traveller. Any amount above 25,000 has to be declared. If it is higher than that, SARS customs officers will detain the balance and the traveller would have to apply to the Reserve Bank for the release of the money, subject to a justifiable explanation. So that's the one part. The feedback we gave to the leader of the opposition is that SARS can find no evidence that such a declaration has been made, which means effectively if the traveller maintains that they had made the declaration, they would have to provide evidence. On the other hand, SARS, in terms of assessing the tax liability of a taxpayer, and in this case, the president, together with the entities in question, SARS has to satisfy itself that all income that has been disclosed in the tax return are in fact correct, and secondly, all deductions or costs are allowable. And in all instances, in the three entities, the three taxpayers, the individual and the two entities, SARS has assessed all the outstanding or the historical returns. In fact, what is quite encouraging is that the selection of the entity actually took place before the public found out through the media about the transaction. And that is because SARS uses a sophisticated risk profiling and case selection methodology. And it is based on that methodology that we selected the entity in question for audit. And based on the audit and the investigation we've done, we can say that all outstanding returns and questions are submitted, all outstanding payments are paid, there is therefore no outstanding liability, and that means the taxpayer is fully compliant. That's the statement we made, and we could not make that statement without the consent of the president and the public officers who are responsible for those entities. It is on that basis that SARS therefore encourages all high-profile leaders in society, politicians in particular, to be more transparent. We are a country struggling with corruption, struggling with eroding trust. And whilst there is no law that this must be the case, we make this appeal to high-profile leaders to build public trust in the system of governance, in the system of politics, as well as in the institutions that government administer.
And Commissioner, if someone is watching tonight, then they have, some questions, and they probably would have seen the earlier reports where, the buyer was talking about having all this documentation and how he says he declared and he's got all the documents, and then even claiming in that particular report that these documents are now with the SABC. So someone watching tonight and wants to know what happens now, because you say you do not have these particular records. So how does this matter then move forward?
If a declaration, in fact, did take place, then the buyer should have two documentation evidences at least. The first would be a receipt or a statement by SARS that it had detained the money. It would have the full details, the amount, the date, etc. And the buyer would then also have documentation that it had applied to the Reserve Bank and had sought and obtained approval for the money. And any traveller, obviously, including this particular instance, the traveller is therefore at liberty to disclose those documentation to make the point that they have made publicly.
And, I mean, one of the other things that people, I also saw talking about and quite a lot was that they perhaps are confused about, the fact that SARS is not really going to worry about, following the money. So someone who's sitting tonight and saying, does SARS care if, the sale was in cash or EFT or any other means? How would you then respond to that?
Of course, SARS cares about the money. And the point about not following the money has to be placed in context.
Yeah.
In every instance, an investigation starts as a civil investigation, not a criminal investigation. SARS, in its investigation, will exchange information with the taxpayer in question, and if the evidence and the evidentiary material submitted by a taxpayer complies and fulfills the requirement that SARS has on which it can perform a accurate assessment, then the matter closes. If there is any concern that there is a criminal deed that has been perpetrated, then SARS also has a criminal investigation function in law, and it will continue to pursue that. And to the extent that there may be any criminal investigation, in any case, I'm not speaking of the specific taxpayer, then SARS will work with the other law enforcement agencies, with the FIC, with the NPA, with the Hawks, to pursue a criminal matter. The statement we placed out gives or confirms that as far as SARS's investigation is concerned, the taxpayer is fully compliant in the fulfillment of their obligation, which in summary again means that we found the record of transactions that constitutes the exchange of goods and services for the payment of money. In this particular instance, SARS will look at whether payment was made, not necessarily whether that payment is in cash or through other forms of payment. Remember, SARS cannot follow media speculation. SARS has to follow the evidence and can probe and ask more questions. And SARS is satisfied that, one, the sales took place, two, it was fully disclosed as income for tax purposes, and the declarations made was comprehensive enough. The engagement for additional questions would have brought any other assurance to us, and on that basis, the assessment is complete and the taxpayer is compliant.
And Commissioner, just before I let you go, very briefly, I just would like, of course, to hear your reaction on this one. I mean, the economy contracting, S&P unexpectedly downgrading South Africa's credit rating outlook to stable from positive. This surely, of course, is not good news for the economy.
Of course, it's not good news. And we know that we have been struggling with an economy that's not creating jobs. We also have a trade deficit at the beginning of this year. And so all of us as South Africans should be concerned, because when we get a credit down rating, it means that the cost of living for all of us goes up because the cost of money for financial institutions goes up. But also, more importantly, investor confidence is affected by this. And that also means that fixed investment in South Africa, which is much needed for our economy, the production base, the economy to improve. So yes, it is in fact a message that should concern us. We should never trivialize these ratings that comes from these agencies, because the market is sensitive to these messages, and anything that expresses a negative sentiment towards us just takes us a little bit further back in an already struggling and ailing economy where growth has been stubborn. And in terms of poverty, inequality, unemployment, these are the stubborn residues with which we have not made enough success over the last 3 decades. And that should be top of mind for every leader in government and in civil society. And unless these issues are addressed, we have a growing problem that ultimately becomes unmanageable.
All right. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for your time. We do appreciate it. That was SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter.